A plane is slicing through the snowy hills of Alaska. 2 passengers, 1 killer, and absolutely no way to escape. The plane is tiny, the landscape below is deadly, and somewhere at 30,000 feet above the ground are 2 people trapped in a metal tube with a monster. There's nowhere to run. The weather's too dangerous to land. Nobody's coming to save the day. And with every minute that passes, the chances of survival get slimmer and slimmer. This sounds like the start to a fun thriller movie, right? Now throw in Mark Wahlberg playing the lead, Mel Gibson directing his first film in 9 years, and a reasonable $25 million budget, which means that it would be pretty easy for this movie to turn a profit. Then also factor in the movie being released in the dead zone of January when competition is scarce and audiences are so much more open to watching anything that looks even remotely entertaining. This should have been an easy win. A confined space thriller, 2 very big A-list names, twist after twist about who can be trusted. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything, apparently. 2025 isn't even over yet, and Hollywood has already managed to lose hundreds of millions of dollars on movies that nobody asked for, nobody wanted, and in many cases, nobody even knew existed until they had already flopped. Flight Risk, the film that proved January box office success, means absolutely nothing. Mel Gibson hadn't directed a movie since Hacksaw Ridge in 2016. That film was nominated for 6 Academy Awards and made over $180 million worldwide on a $40 million budget. It proved that despite his personal controversies, Gibson could still deliver prestige filmmaking that both audiences and critics respected. So, when Lionsgate announced Gibson would return to directing with Flight Risk, starring Mark Wahlberg making a rare appearance as the villain instead of the hero, there was genuine interest. The premise had potential. A U.S. Marshal transporting a witness across the Alaskan wilderness discovers their pilot is actually an assassin sent to kill them. And Flight Risk was released in January 2025. And that is when all the problems started. The film opened at #1 at the box office, which sounds impressive until you realize it beat nothing to get the #1 spot. The competition was dead. And the film was only able to earn around $12 million in its opening weekend, even though, as I already said, it had virtually no competition. But the final box office numbers told the real story. So the film opened at #1 at the box office and would go on to make $48.7 million worldwide, which technically means it made its money back on its $25 million budget. But after marketing costs, distribution, and theater cuts, the film likely broke even at best. And here's one of the biggest problems that audiences pointed out. The trailer gave away practically everything. This meant that audiences walked in knowing exactly what was supposed to be the surprise, which would have destroyed any tension the movie might have had. And the ending was apparently so catastrophically bad that people were literally walking out of theaters before the end credits. Not because they were upset, not because they were offended, but because the ending was so nonsensical, so tone-deaf, so unbelievably dumb, that audiences just gave up. For Gibson, this was supposed to be a triumphant return to directing after 9 years away. And for Wahlberg, this was supposed to be the role that proved he had more range than people gave him credit for, a chance to show he could carry a thriller as the villain and finally break his unfortunate Rotten Tomatoes streak of not appearing in a single critically well-received film in many, many years. But instead, the film opened at #1, possibly broke even, and then disappeared. Mickey 17, the film that exposed Robert Pattinson's very limited commercial appeal. In 2020, Bong Joon-ho made history. His film Parasite became the first non-English language movie to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards. It was a cultural sensation that made over $250 million worldwide despite being a Korean film with subtitles. Almost overnight, Bong became one of the most celebrated directors in the world, and whatever he did next, everyone would be watching. So when Warner Brothers gave him $118 million to make Mickey 17, a science fiction dark comedy starring Robert Pattinson as a man who gets cloned every time he dies, expectations were sky high. This was going to be Bong's big Hollywood moment. A major studio science fiction film with a Batman-level A-list star, a wild premise about expendable workers on a distant planet who are brought back to life over and over, and the creative freedom to make something completely original. The film was based on Edward Ashton's novel Mickey 7, but most audiences had never heard of it, which meant this was essentially an original property. Pattinson would play multiple versions of Mickey Barnes, an expendable worker who accidentally ends up with two clones of himself existing at the same time. The setup had dark humor, social commentary about exploited workers, and all the genre-bending weirdness that made Parasite so compelling. Warner Brothers was so confident they gave Bong a massive budget and a prime release date. But then, they started getting nervous. The film was originally scheduled for March 24th, 2024. Then it got pushed to January 31st, 2025. January? The month where studios traditionally dump movies they don't believe in? But then it got pushed again to March 7th, 2025. All that shifting around sent a clear message. The studio didn't really understand what type of movie they had, and they definitely weren't sure if audiences would like it. And you know what? They were very, very right to be worried. Mickey 17 opened in March 2025 to $19 million domestically. It topped the box office that weekend, but only because there was virtually no competition. The total domestic box office for the entire weekend was just $19.1 million, one of the lowest weekend totals in years. Internationally, the film struggled just as badly, only earning $24.5 million from international markets. The movie's worldwide total currently sits at $130.3 million. Warner Brothers reportedly spent around $80 million on marketing, bringing total costs to roughly $198 million. When you factor in theater cuts and distribution costs, the film needed to earn somewhere between $240 million and $300 million worldwide just to break even. Instead, it barely earned half of that. Warner Brothers was staring at losses that could exceed, well, over $100 million on a science fiction film from an acclaimed director that couldn't sell enough tickets to cover its basic costs. So, what exactly went wrong? Well, the reviews were actually pretty decent. The film holds a 77% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and 73% from audiences. But decent reviews would not be enough. The movie needed to be an event, a must-see theatrical experience that audiences couldn't wait to catch on opening weekend, especially given it cost close to $250 million to make. Part of the problem was the premise itself. A dark comedy about a guy who dies repeatedly and gets cloned is a tough sell to mainstream audiences. It's weird, it's nihilistic, and the trailers didn't quite capture what the movie was actually about. Was it a thriller? A comedy? A social satire? The marketing couldn't figure it out. So cash-strapped audiences weren't about to gamble their hard-earned money on a question mark and chose to wait for streaming instead. And then there's Robert Pattinson. He's a fantastic actor, one of the best working today. But outside of established franchises like Twilight or The Batman, Pattinson doesn't put butts in seats. His non-franchise films, no matter how good, tend to underperform. Warner Brothers was betting that after The Batman's success, Pattinson had become a true movie star who could open any film. But Mickey 17 proved that was wrong. It will most likely find a second life on streaming, where audiences can take a chance on weird science fiction without leaving their couch. But as a theatrical release, it's one of the biggest disappointments of 2025. War of the Worlds is when Screen Life became a 2-hour Amazon commercial. H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds in 1898 as a terrifying story about humanity facing extinction from alien invaders. Over the decades, it's been adapted countless times, and the story has endured because it taps into something primal. the fear of facing an enemy we can't understand or defeat. So when Amazon announced they were producing their own modern adaptation starring Ice Cube and Eva Longoria, there was at least some curiosity. The premise sounded interesting. A Department of Homeland Security officer who works for a government surveillance program that can monitor every person on Earth discovers his family is in danger during an alien invasion. The entire film would be told through computer screens, security cameras, and surveillance footage, a screen life format that had worked well for films like Searching. The movie wrapped production, then it sat on a shelf, and sat, and sat. That should have been the first red flag. When a major studio film sits unreleased for half a decade, something has gone catastrophically wrong. War of the Worlds was finally dumped onto Amazon Prime Video in July 2025. No theatrical release, no press screenings for critics, just quietly uploaded to streaming and left to die. The reviews were instant and brutal. The film initially opened to a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. 0%. With early viewers describing it as a 2-hour Amazon commercial. And they weren't exaggerating. The movie features blatant product placement for things like Spotify and Microsoft Teams, but Amazon reserved top billing for itself. In one of the critical plot points, Ice Cube's character desperately needs a USB, but he doesn't have one on him. The solution? Order it on Amazon Prime Air and get it conveniently delivered by drone during an alien invasion. While civilization is collapsing, an Amazon drone delivers a USB stick and saves humanity. Okay, so the producer later claimed all the Amazon product placement was a happy accident. And guess what? No one believed him. But the product placement wasn't even the worst part. People tore apart the cinematography, the writing, and Ice Cube's performance. Ice Cube spends most of the movie sitting at a computer screen, trying really hard to look shocked while watching security footage. H.G. Wells wrote about humanity being invaded by technologically superior aliens. And Amazon made a movie where humanity is saved by same-day delivery and Jeff Bezos' logistics network. The film currently holds a 2.5 on IMDb and was quietly dumped onto streaming with zero fanfare, where it would have disappeared completely if YouTubers hadn't discovered it, only to immediately turn it into a viral punching bag. They made reaction video after reaction video, each one helping to give the film a second life it probably would never have had otherwise.